Hi everyone, welcome back to Med School EU. My name is Andriy, and the topic of today's video is going to be nephron filtration. So we're going to go into a new unit called homeostasis, as the nephron function perfectly fits within that narrative. So let's begin. So to start off, nephron ultrafiltration is the first phenomenon that begins the filtration of our blood within the kidneys. It, of course, happens in the nephrons, the little parts that are all around the kidneys. There's millions of nephrons in the kidneys that do the filtration process. And it's basically just a long tube in which a lot of the substances will be passed through. A lot of the water will be extracted so that our urine is not dilute. So we're not going to be losing water. And that is kind of the main function of the nephron, is to clear out all the metabolites and clear out all the unnecessary wastes. So let's zoom in on the nephron ultrafiltration, where it happens. So more specifically, we are gonna zoom in on a part that is a connection between the glomerular capillaries and the lumen of Bowman's capsule. So the Bowman's capsule is the part that surrounds the capillaries, and we talked about the anatomy of the nephron in the previous lecture, so you should definitely go check that one out first before we proceed with this video. However, if you have gone through it, then you know exactly what's happening here, because we have the afferent arteriole coming into the nephron that is going to then pull inside of this Bowman's capsule. So the Bowman's capsule is part of the nephron, the tubes of the filtrate that is going to be surrounding the capillaries. It goes afferent to efferent capillaries. And as we zoom in here, we have a connection between the blood, obviously the blood vessel, the capillary, and we have our Bowman, the inside of the Bowman's capsule, so the lumen of the Bowman's capsule, which is right here. This is the lumen. Now this connection is composed of two separate layers. The first layer is going to be, of course, our endothelium of the capillary, so endothelium. And the second layer is going to be called the basement membrane. And finally, these large yellowish cells right here are going to be called podocytes. And the podocytes are on the side of the Bowman's capsule, on the side of the filtrate. So when we begin talking about the barriers that are involved here, it's important to notice that the endothelium has gaps. Of course, the endothelium is one cell thick, and in between those cells, we're going to have gaps in which a lot of the blood plasma is going to seep through, and is going to pass on its materials over to the lumen of the Bowman's capsule. Now, the basement membrane is made up of collagen and glycoproteins. It's specifically designed to let certain things in and other things out. So, for example, the basement membrane prevents large proteins and the blood cells from getting through. So the blood cells, as you can see, look at how large this red blood cell is, and the white blood cells could be even larger than that. They definitely cannot seep through the endothelium, let alone going through the basement membrane. Especially, what's the significance of all of this is that, more importantly, we're going to have large proteins that will be floating around that cannot fit through here. So large proteins will not pass through the basement membrane. They may pass through the endothelium, but the basement membrane will prevent them from entering. So what is driving this whole process? What is the force that is making all of these solutes and the plasma to seep through the gaps over here? And primarily, that's going to be caused by the water potential difference, because the difference between the plasma and the filtrate is extremely high due to the buildup of blood pressure. So the afferent arteriole right here, this is afferent, is going to be much wider in diameter compared to the efferent arteriole. And when it is larger, all the blood will be pooling in there, and it's creating pressure, blood pressure, that will be pushing all of these metabolites through these gaps. Although the water potential will be slightly lowered because the concentration of solutes in the blood is of course much higher than the concentration of solutes in the lumen of the Bowman's capsule. However, the overall blood pressure that will be accumulated due to the pooling of the blood in the capillaries is going to overweigh this small effect of the difference in the concentration of solutes. So therefore, all of these metabolites will be pushed through from the capillary into the lumen of the Bowman's capsule. So in this diagram, we have an outline of the substances that will go through and the substances that won't. And something to note here is that pretty much everything goes through at its peak concentration. So concentration in the blood is going to equal the concentration that we get in the glomerular filtrate. That's a tough word to say, glomerular filtrate. And so we are going to have water fully going through, and it's going to level out with whatever the blood plasma is going to look like. The proteins, however, will not seep through. We're going from 80 to 0.05. So the proteins, the large proteins, will not be getting by. Amino acids will seep through, glucose, urea, uric acid, creatinine, and of course our inorganic ions are all going to pass through. The only exception will be the proteins. So it's important to remember that proteins and of course the cells will not be going through the nephron ultrafiltration. So moving down the tube from the Bowman's capsule, the first part of the tube is going to be our proximal tubule. And in the proximal tubule, we're going to have something called selective reabsorption. Reabsorption meaning that we'll be taking up a lot of the substances that were in the blood plasma back into the tissue fluid because we don't want to get rid of it. We don't want to get rid of the amino acids. We don't want to get rid of the glucose. We don't want to get rid of many of the inorganic ions. And so therefore, a lot of them, a huge chunk of them, most of the reabsorption will be occurring in the proximal tubule. And this is the mechanism how it is going to be happening. So first, the major driver of this is that the basement membrane in the proximal tubules is specialized. And this basement membrane in the proximal tubule is going to have our Na plus potassium plus pumps, so sodium potassium pumps. Now these sodium potassium pumps will be using ATP, of course, made up from the mitochondria, and it will be directing the sodium right here out into the vein. So there's going to be veins and blood vessels running all around the proximal tubule and the rest of the nephron as well, where reabsorption will be happening and it will be taken up into this blood vessel. So the sodium will be continuously removed out of the filtrate through this mechanism. Now, because the concentration of sodium is now going to be low in these cells in the basement membrane of the proximal tubule, it will cause the glucose and the amino acids and more sodium to follow through and to continuously be moved outside, because if we continuously reabsorb our sodium, then the cells will require more sodium to be pumped in there. Now, of course, this part is going to be happening more passively, whereas this one requires ATP to do our transport. And of course, the blood vessel will be traveling at a decent speed to remove the sodium and the chlorine inorganic ions out of the filtrate, because this is something that we do not need to be excreting, right? Glucose and amino acids are going to be useful for the body, so they're going to stay in the body. And through which process are we going to do that? It's going to be selective reabsorption, and more particularly, it will happen in the proximal tubule. Just remember that in the proximal tubule, most of the reabsorption will be happening due to the specialized tissue of the walls of the proximal tubule, which has a basement membrane that includes the sodium-potassium pumps that will be actively removing these ions out of the cell. And because of the ions following inside of the capillaries now, or the veins, the glucose and amino acids will follow the same process passively. And how does it happen passively? Well, because the concentration here is going to be decreasing, the concentration here in the filtrate will actually be increasing because we're continuously removing it from these cells. And therefore, it's going to move down passively inside down its concentration gradient. Now, of course, here it will be removed against this concentration gradient, and that is why we need active sodium-potassium pumps to be doing that. Another thing that's important to mention here is that the nitrogenous metabolites that we talked about previously, the urea and the uric acid and the creatinine, those three substances will not actually be reabsorbed in the proximal tubule. They will not be going back into the blood because that is something we want to be excreting. So the next part we're going to talk about is reabsorption in the loop of Henle. So we've talked about the proximal convoluted tubule. Now the next part will be this loop of Henle. So let's zoom in on that. Now the loop of Henle is going to have some specialized tissue because these blue parts here are going to be walls that are permeable to sodium and permeable to water. Now on the other side of the loop of Henle, the structure here is going to be permeable to the solutes, but it will be impermeable to water. So we're actually going to start going backwards because this is a little bit easier to conceptualize of how this is happening. And this system is going to be called a counter current multiplier. So we begin here with our sodium and chloride that are actively transported out of the ascending limb. So this part is the ascending limb that's impermeable to water. The descending limb is permeable to water. Now the ascending limb is going to be actively transporting out our sodium and the chloride ions into the tissue fluid. Now this is going to raise the concentration of sodium and the chloride inside the tissue fluid right here at number 2. And this in turn causes the loss of water from the descending limb. So now the water will be filtered out and into the tissue fluid. Will be taken out as much water as possible because the amount of solutes has increased. Therefore, it's going to be pushing the water pressure from, of course, the high to low. Because if we have more solutes at number 2, then the water is going to follow the solutes. Now, because we're going to have a loss of water in the descending limb, at the very bottom of the loop of Henle, we're going to have the sodium and the chloride ions diffuse out as well. Because of the loss of water, there's going to be an increased number of solutes. And so these solutes will be diffused out, and again, forcing the water at the bottom of the loop of Henle to be reabsorbed back into the tissue fluid. And the reason for this happening is because this is going to be considered as the very bottom of the medulla, right? So everything that goes below here is going to be the medulla. Now the medulla, the further down you go in the medulla of the kidney, the more concentrated you're going to have of the sodium and the chloride solutions. So these concentrations will be extremely high at the very bottom of it. And that's why the water will continuously be reabsorbed into the tissue fluid, because the concentration keeps on rising and rising and rising. And of course, the sodium and the chloride pumps will add into that effect from the ascending limb. So now in terms of the rest of the tubule, we're not going to discuss it in great detail, but the distal convoluted tubule is going to continue to reabsorb some ions like potassium, but for the most part it will be still reabsorbing water. And as soon as we get to the collecting duct, that is the site where most of the water will be reabsorbed. And so I'm not going to get into the great details of that because it's not necessary for the IMAT exam. It was just something that is quite fascinating to learn about. But we are going to go over the reabsorption summary so you can get a glimpse of how much, in terms of percentage, is being reabsorbed in which parts of the nephron. So in the proximal tubule, 100% of the glucose will be reabsorbed. 100% of the amino acids will be reabsorbed as well. We'll have 70% of the sodium ions that will be reabsorbed. Again, most of it is happening in the proximal tubule, and as you can see with the percentages, this is exactly what it is, because we also have 70% with the potassium ion, we'll have 70% of the phosphate, 70% of our calcium, and 30% of magnesium, as well as the 70% of water. So as you can see here, the major site of water reabsorption and major site of all reabsorption will be done in the proximal tubule. Now, if we're heading next to the ascending limb of the loop of Henle, we're going to have 25% of the sodium reabsorption, 20% of potassium reabsorption, 25% of calcium reabsorption, and 60% of magnesium reabsorption. Next, going to the distal convoluted tubule. In here, we're going to have 5% of sodium reabsorption, 8% calcium, 5% of magnesium, and water and some urea will also be reabsorbed in the distal tubule. However, the amounts are variable depending on how much water the person has, if they're dehydrated, if they're overhydrated. All of those things will come into play. However, that is not going to be the major site of reabsorption for water and urea. On the other hand, if we're talking about the collecting duct, then most of the water will be reabsorbed. The rest of the water will be reabsorbed in the collecting duct. As you can see, only 70% of water was reabsorbed in proximal tubule. Some will be reabsorbed in the distal tubule. The rest will be reabsorbed in the collecting duct. And again, this will be variable depending on the water control system. That, again, is something we're going to learn in the next lecture, depending on the water saturation levels of the person. And so all of these, the collecting duct is going to have plenty of distal tubules running into it. This is why we have all of these branches. And all of these distal tubules will continuously be running into several collecting ducts, which will then lead to the bladder, or first go through the pelvis, then into the bladder, and then will be excreted through the urethra. So this concludes today's lecture on the reabsorption function of the nephron. In the next lecture, we're going to talk about homeostasis of water control.